Did you know that there is a country in the world today that has never paid its debt? Corruption, bribery, embezzlement, fraud, nepotism, cronyism, all of these things are as old as the hills. But what we have just said are not mere qualities or characteristics of one man. We are talking about the blueprint of a nation, the motherland, the Great Britain. There's this narrative that we often hear that Britain is this great democracy that gave India independence, that it was Mahatma Gandhi who led the freedom movement, and so on. But let me tell you something about Britain. The British government has been involved in at least 183 corruption scandals since 2010, and the Prime Minister at the time was David Cameron. He resigned in disgrace after the Panama Papers leaks. His name was among those who were mentioned in the Mossack Fonseca files. What does that tell you? That even in their so-called motherland, the British are adept at corruption. It runs in their blood. Why am I telling you all this? Because today we will talk about a war that was fought more than 5 decades ago. But it has many lessons for us even today. This is the story of the Civil War, Biafra versus Britain. It all started in the 1950s when the British decolonization process was at its peak. They were hurriedly granting independence to most of their colonies. In Africa, there was a scramble for the last of the British colonies. Most of these regions did not have a history of mass nationalist movements like we saw in India or Ghana, so Britain had an easy time. They granted independence to Nigeria in 1960. 1 year later, they granted it to Tanzania, Uganda, Congo. But there was one region that did not accept the British decision, the Igbo people. They refused to accept Nigeria's independence. Why? Because they felt that the British were deliberately creating artificial divisions. The Igbos were divided between Nigeria and Cameroon, so they wanted a homeland of their own. And this is how Biafra was born. In 1967, the Igbo people declared independence. They named their new country Biafra. The British were not having it. On one side, they had the moral obligation to unite Africa. On the other, there was oil. Nigeria had vast oil reserves, and Britain needed them. So the British government sent in troops. They crushed the Biafran forces. At least 100,000 people were killed. More than 2 million people became refugees. And what happened to the rest? Well, they were sold into slavery in other parts of Africa and Asia. And it was one of the darkest chapters in modern human history. But why are we telling you this story? Because even today, Britain benefits from the wealth of Biafra. Let me show you some figures. The UK's total assets are $146 billion. Out of this, $11 billion is held in overseas territories. Guess which country owns the biggest chunk of this money? Nigeria. The UK and Nigeria both signed a deal in 2017. It says that London would hold and manage Nigeria's money. In return,